Good afternoon, everyone. This is Committee Chair Ashley Esposito. I would like to welcome everyone to the February 25th, 2026 Policy Committee meeting. If you have not done so, please mute your phone. Anyone who does not mute their phone may be muted by the call moderator or removed from the call. And additionally, please turn off your video if you are not a board member, the CEO, or her staff. So I will now read a roll call of who is present to identify who we have on the call. Please identify yourself first before speaking on the record. Chair Sally. Commissioner Ames Messenger.
Ames Messenger present.
Awesome, thank you. Commissioner Kenyatta Bay. And Commissioner Chicas Guzman. Okay, we've got 2 present and 2 absent. Members of the public that would like to provide public comment can do so by signing up the day before the meeting. Up to 5 individuals will be given the opportunity to provide either written or a pre-recorded comment for the policy committee. We do have enough room for 5 speakers, or no, do we have 5? Yeah, 5 speakers, and each will be granted 3 minutes for their testimony. All public comments should address policy-related issues that we're discussing. And sorry. Apologies, I'm trading for my phone. And individuals or groups interested in providing comment to the committee can sign up one of 3 ways, either emailing public comment at bcps.k12.md.us. You can call the board office at 443-642-4095 or visit the board office at the Alice G. Pender Hughes building at 200 East North Avenue, room 406. For more information about the policy committee and our policy calendar, there's also a form that you're able to submit feedback on our policy items on the website at www.baltimorecitypublicschools.org under the policy section. So for our agenda today, we're going to be first discussing policy GBM, which is temporary employment. And I'd like to welcome up our folks that have a presentation.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Let's see. Good afternoon. My name is Ayana Patterson, and I am with the Office of Human Capital. Today, I will be presenting on policy GBM temporary employment, along with my counterpart, William Moran, our Director of Talent Management. Policy GBM is directly aligned to the board's strategic priority 2, supporting qualified staff and to recruit and retain. Policy GBM and the Administrative Regulation GBM-RA provides guidance around how we hire, compensate, and extend the assignments of our temporary employees. Next slide. When we talk about temporary employees, there are 3 important things that we really want to keep in mind. And the first is that our temporary roles are at will, which means the assignment can end at any time. Secondly, these positions cannot be used to replace regular employees or employees that are on surplus. And finally, temporary employees receive only those mandatory benefits that are required by law. For example, they're eligible for sick and safe leave under the Maryland Healthy Working Families Act, which allows them to take paid time off when they're sick or need to care for a family member when otherwise they would have to go unpaid. Next slide. Under our current policy, a key feature is the 90-day workday limitation on the policy. And that's in place because those roles are intended to address short-term operational and instructional support needs. Our current policy contains 3 categories that are exempt from that rule. and those are school-based positions, and they would be positions that provide support for the improvement of instructional programming or either the direct enhancement of student learning or achievement. So something such as our tutors. The other two categories are specialty instructors and extended day program staff. Next slide. So the benefits of our temporary employees are that they provide the district with tremendous value. They give our schools and offices the ability to pivot quickly, fill those time-bound roles, and then access specialized skill sets that, otherwise they would not be able to contract in-house for. And a great example of that are our AMP contractors who have supported us through our transition, through our financial system and staffing of Fusion. They've built the system, documented testing, provided training resources, freeing up our permanent staff to be able to focus on our daily operations. Another significant category of those would be our retirees that can return for limited durations to address either highly specialized work, or to coach permanent staff, helping us keep inside that historical knowledge, ensuring continuity in our operations. Next slide. As much as our temporary employees bring tremendous value, there are some challenges in how the current system supports them. We want to honor their experience and what they contribute, and right now they don't receive the same evaluation and or growth opportunities that our permanent employees receive. They don't have access to our programs like tuition reimbursement or things that our permanent employees do, which both limits their development and their ability to fully support them. Next slide. We want to talk about the revisions that we would like to propose. So first off, we're proposing that we clarify some of the key definitions that are listed in the policy to align with other policies that we have across the system. We'd like to also define those definitions as employee, negotiated agreement, and positions to make sure that we're being consistent in our usage. We also want to clarify benefit eligibility by explicitly naming that sick and safe leave policy that I referenced earlier. Most notably, we want to expand those categories under that 90-day rule, taking those categories from 3 to 6. We want to make sure that we're adding a caveat for our rehired retirees, our temporary employees that are working less than 10 hours, and then those that are hired for those special projects for defined durations of time. Next slide. Additional policy revisions that we are looking to make are, we'd like to replace the phrase regular city schools employment with permanent position to make sure that we're ensuring clarity. Yes. We want to make sure that we are reflecting a budgeted role for the year, which may be contingent on grants or operational needs, but we also want to clarify that this temporary employee policy does not cover substitute teachers, and that can be found in another policy, which is GBN. Next slide. On implementation, we are aligning our temporary hiring processes with our new system, Fusion, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, that guides our hiring and processing now of our temp employees. We want to make sure that it also aligns with how we are doing the hiring of our temp employees so that the regulations that we have, they have to update and make sure that they reflect the current system. We also want to state that temporary pay scales should be comparable to those for similar permanent roles. Supervisors are going to receive guidance on sick and safe leave. We'll reinforce this guidance through manager communications, through our monthly muscle meetings, our updates to our school leaders. We'll have resources that are also located on our website that people can refer to make sure that they have everything that they need to be able to effectively communicate about the new benefit. And lastly, we want to make sure that we are creating opportunities to create those employees who are working full-time hours for more than 90 days within that 6-month period into permanent positions, barring any exceptional circumstances, and making sure that we're still being consistent with our negotiated union agreements. Next slide. So we'll be doing our standard Tier 2 stakeholder engagement. We're going to post the proposed red lines on our website for feedback. We're going to also schedule presentations with our stakeholders or either give them an opportunity to respond to us with written feedback. Regarding the timeline, this presentation was submitted prior to our initial date that we were supposed to come before policy, which was January 27th. So the next slide that we're going to be looking at is going to be a little bit out of whack, but we do have some new dates for you that we've gotten from our board office. Well, you can do the next slide. I'm sorry. So that revised timeline now is, of course, we're here today on 2/24 with the policy committee. We're going to be going to first reader on April the 7th, and then we're going to advance to second reader on March the 5th. Next slide. That concludes our presentation, and we're going to open up the floor for questions for anyone that may have a question about the policy or any of the proposed revisions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. I will open it up for questions to my colleagues.
I think that's just me today. I will ask the question because I know that this has been a ongoing source of conversation with the board. In terms of just walking through for the presentation, kind of what are the costs, especially at the school level? Like the benefits of temporary is that there is a lot of flexibility there that you can kind of assess what needs are. I'll do a little bit more flexibility in meeting the needs of individual workers about whether they need benefits and kind of et cetera. But I think just maybe looking at a high level of like, what are the costs, both the district and the industry of that flexibility, whether that's like accountability and compliance and fidelity to like procedures and policies, but maybe just at a high level now. And then I think preparing, we'll all know that we'll have this conversation in public session, but like, what are kind of the pros and cons of this, and how is this reopening of this topic this year different than kind of what we were looking at a year ago?
Ayan, I can jump in. Commissioner Eames Messenger, thank you for your question. I think we are still trying to submit or firm up what the actual costs are. It is a very different approach to talk about the schools having to pick up the cost of benefits if they go beyond the 90 days, and we want to make sure we're accurately communicating what they would look like. I think the significant difference in having this conversation now versus in years before is that we are aware of some, I guess, aspects that we weren't quite always like had top of mind around, like the cost of the benefits of what people working a certain amount of hours or a certain amount of time in schools were actually eligible for, but also just trying to, I guess, more deliberately manage some of the increasing costs of temps and being more mindful to make sure that they are not, I guess, taking the place of bargaining unit positions, and really having intentional conversations with principals around, like, if people are working a certain amount of hours, but also performing roles and responsibilities of roles that we can create a full-time position for, that we should do so, while also keeping top of mind around what we're able to pay people. And is it competitive based on what they are currently making at an hourly rate, and sustainable if we move it into a full-time bargaining position. And I think as we continue to talk through this internally as a department, and also like engage other stakeholders, school leaders, other offices that it will impact, we will be able to come back with like a more comprehensive, cohesive approach that we hope is like beneficial to both the district, but also gives schools some flexibility and latitude with continuing using temps appropriately.
Will and Ayanna, this is Josh Sivan, Chief Legal Officer. I think we might want to also put up, in response to Commissioner Eames Messenger's question, I believe it is slides 6 and 7, because those talk about the benefits and also the challenges.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Chief Sivan. Will you have it, or you need me to share?
Bringing it up now.
Okay.
I also have it. I think just some of that is like when we move into framing with the full board, we go heavy on that. And the last kind of point of clarification, and this is for my knowledge that I should know and I don't. In terms of folks that are eligible for temporary employment, in terms of as opposed to permanent positions, is there a difference in the requirement, not just around like education, but also looking at, legal status, past record? Are there any other variabilities? Looking, because there's the student safety component, but there's also like creating an inclusive, supportive work environment. So I guess, are there any factors that would come into play there?
So I think we need to separate the compliance for anyone who's working at our schools with the requirements of any given position. So the compliance of anyone who's in contact with our students, you do have to pass a background check, a criminal background check by getting fingerprinted. And so regardless of whether you're a permanent employee, a temporary employee, a volunteer who has unsupervised access to students, a contingent worker employed by a vendor, who has unsupervised sustained access to students, they all need to get fingerprinted and pass a criminal background check. If you are our employee, regardless of whether you are a temporary or permanent employee, you have to be authorized to work in the United States. So you do have to do Form I-9 and provide documentation that you have work authorization. The temp job descriptions themselves, the different levels of temp that we have that are aligned with different pay scales, do not specify a specific education level or other requirements that our permanent jobs do when they are more specific about the responsibilities and job duties and have requirements that are aligned with that.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Thank you, Emily. So as a follow-up question, I know you all mentioned that you're still doing like a cost analysis. Would that be something that you all would have prepared by the first reader? Because I do think, I'm thinking of some folks that are part of other committees, and I think that would be helpful.
So I can say that I think what Will was talking about in terms of cost analysis, we have in efforts to be more compliant with the Affordable Care Act, announced to our principals in the FY27 budget guidance that if they have a temp that they are planning to have work 30 or more hours per week for 90 or more days, that they will qualify for benefits and that they will be charged fringe as well as the hourly rate of the temp. Now, of course, principals can manage how they're structuring temp support in their school, so they're not crossing that threshold. And the human capital partner on Will's team can work with principals to figure out what's the best staffing structure for their team to meet the needs of their schools. We're working with finance on what will be the exact structure, but if you do have a benefits eligible temp, you will not just be paying the hourly rate, you'll be paying the fringe costs for benefits as well in the P-STAR and how much money you're needing to put into that particular P-STAR. So we have what we have spent on temps in the past. We know what principals are putting into their budget in terms of temp staff line items, and can pull that together. And we're just working on the mechanics of costing the fringe for temps and substitutes who are eligible, that will be operationalizing for next fiscal year. So I'm not sure that's actually something that it's related to this policy, but not to the revisions that we're proposing. It's just ongoing efforts to be more in compliance with our federal laws and our union contracts. We're making sure we're in alignment there.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none. Thank you all so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And our next policy item that we'll be discussing is IKEA, promotion and retention, grades 12, K through 12, and IKEB graduation standards, tier 3.
Good afternoon, commissioners. This is Eric Jefferson. I'm going to share my screen, and I am here on behalf of our Chief Academic Officer, Chief Joan Dabrowski, and my counterpart, who is the Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, which is Kevin Culpet. And like I said, I'm Eric Jefferson, Executive Director of Secondary Success and Innovation. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. And make the slideshow happen.
Yeah, it's showing now. It's not in presentation mode, Mr. Jefferson, but I do see it.
And there it is. Try it. It should be in presentation mode now. No,
not yet. Not from what we're
there
seeing.
it is.
There you go.
There it is.
Making
So-
the magic happen.
Making the magic happen. So this is proposed revisions for board policy IKEA, which is the promotion policy, and IKEB, which is our graduation policy. Our board priorities, the strategic priorities, we are really honing in on board priority 1 and board priority 4. And so as we look at rigorous instruction and look at all of the effective engagement throughout stakeholders during these 2 policy revisions. So our agenda today is going to look at our current board policies, our proposed revisions, and then our engagement and timeline for these revisions. So let's look at IKEA and IKEA-RA. This is our promotion and retention policy and regulation. The purpose of IKEA and IKEA-R is to ensure students have the skills and knowledge necessary to promote for promotion through rigorous standards, effective instruction, and supports and interventions. As outlined, procedures for retention and promotion of students, acknowledging the importance and efforts these decisions have on students. And then also is to reduce the instances of grade retention through effective instruction and consistent guidelines for instructional decision making. So we made some adjustments last year to our IKEA-RA and also our IKEB-RA, which are both our regulations, to better align with COMAR and to better align with the blueprint and MSDE. So what we did last school year, we increased the rigor of foundational requirements from promotion from 9th to 10th grade. So we increased the number of credits in the core area for needing math and ELA as a core credit in order to promote to 10th grade from 9th grade. And then we removed the reference of Algebra 2 as a promotional requirement for graduation, because you'll see when we get down to IKEA and IKEB, you'll see that some of the new state policies and the math policy has changed from Algebra 1 geometry to Algebra 2 to integrated Algebra 1, integrated Algebra 2 as graduation requirements. And so now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Kevin Culpet.
Nice. Good afternoon, commissioners. Happy to be here. Mr. Jefferson mentioned the policy changes coming from MSDE. I'm in year 33. I've served in a senior leadership role now for 11 years. And I shared with Dr. Dabrowski that this is the single most significant wave of policy from the state that I've seen in my experience. And we've had iterations of different influences coming from the state for whether it's assessment systems or policy guidance. But with Dr. Wright, our state superintendent, being involved and bringing her learnings from the work that she had in Mississippi, we're really getting a lot. In fact, I'm big in the props. So we have our Maryland pre-K through 12 mathematics policy. We have our comprehensive adolescent literacy policy. We have our comprehensive pre-K through 3 literacy policy, and we have our framework for multi-tiered systems of supports. These are 4 large, about 100 pages of guidance in total. And so what I want to point out to commissioners and anybody listening in the public is we are going to highlight key things from this guidance as it relates to IKEA and IKEA-RA. But that is not the sum total of what this guidance has. So we're really spotlighting in on the things that are affected, that are in here that affect this particular policy. But I'll try to paint a bigger picture of some of the work that's being done. So those 4 big policy and guidance documents, really in the end, MSDE is trying to promote a context of high quality evidence-based instruction in our classrooms that all students have access to. Extra help for those students who are having either reading or mathematics difficulty, teacher training, educator preparation. There's information in here about the assessment systems and progress monitoring that we should have, as well as some of these procedural items that we're going to talk about. Now, as a result of these 4 big sets of guidance that we're receiving, terminology is going to need to change, and we want to make sure that this policy and the regulation reflect what our current practices are. So let's go to the next slide. Big shifts in ELA and mathematics. So because of these policy changes, the state was very directive with locals about what components we should have in our promotion and retention policies. And then it clearly stated out the process for when 3rd graders might be retained due to a lack of reading proficiency. And I'm sure board members are aware, but many people in the public may not be. The retention policy, the literacy policy that had retention information in it was released a couple of years ago. It went through a vetting process. MSDE took feedback. So this is not anything new to the environment. It's just now we're getting a little bit closer to when it's going to be enacted in local school districts. In the mathematics policy, it's important to indicate that there are these requirements for subject acceleration in mathematics, which means I'm a student and I may accelerate in mathematics, but not necessarily in language, arts, and science, and how that's different than, say, like whole grade acceleration when I just simply move to the next grade. And as Mr. Jefferson pointed out, we're moving to an integrated Algebra 1 and 2 as a promotion and graduation requirement versus the previous math courses. All right, so then we're going to go to I wanted to highlight in previous presentations, board members, commissioners asked for information around the retention policy. So this was a policy that has been put in many states across the United States. It's now come home here to Maryland. And it basically says that a student in 3rd grade must demonstrate this adequate reading proficiency in the adopted ELA assessment to be promoted to 4th grade. So you have to pass the state assessment, which is right now our MCAP reading assessment. That assessment is going through a review and revision process as we speak. So what happens if a student doesn't demonstrate? So what the policy calls out is that a student who doesn't demonstrate reading proficiency may go to 4th grade. So they could still go to 4th grade if the following is true. 1, they score at or above on the required performance level of an MSDE approved reassessment. So there's going to be a reassessment opportunity, and that has to be approved by the state, whatever that opportunity is. We've not landed on those decisions yet. We'll be working with the state to come to a conclusion about what that would be for students here in city schools. The other thing, so not only do you have to pass that assessment, but schools need to look at a set of data that might show that the student has more proficiency than what showed up on the state assessment. So we all know that students go into a state assessment environment. It's online. There's a couple of days of assessment around that. Kids having a tough week. I think the state here is recognizing that might have been an off week for that particular student. And so do we have this backup way of looking at students to make sure that we're not making a really high stakes decision like retention without gathering additional information? And so you'll see that there's a variety of assessments that we could look at on a student by student basis, and then still make the decision that the student should move on to the next grade. So there's a little grace in here. It's not an absolute zero-sum game of either you're retained or not retained, but we look at students in their literacy picture in the entirety. Next slide, please, Mr. Jefferson. So there's some other language in the policy associated with what they have called the good cause exemptions, reasons why the retention policy would not apply to you. And I want to go through these because these would be impactors for students. So the first one that's listed is if a student has an individualized education plan, an IEP, and that in that IEP, the school team and the family has determined that that student is on an alternative framework and they're not accessing the graduation pathway, these students would not be subject to that retention information. The second category is related to our multilingual learners. Now, we're seeking some clarification on this, as we are with a lot of policy documents coming from the state. But basically, for students who haven't even received 2 years of their WIDA-aligned instruction, and WIDA stands for that kind of language development standard that's a national standard. So if they haven't had 2 years of this, they shouldn't be retained as a result of that, because we know that language acquisition is fundamental to literacy development. In fact, our students who are multilingual learners, once they've acquired language, English at a proficiency, and are dismissed from English language services, actually go on to be very successful academically. In fact, sometimes better than our all group compared when we look at the data. So we don't want to retain a student who just has not yet had the opportunity to learn the language. The other caveat in here, and we're waiting for MSD to help us operationalize this, is if the student is demonstrating progress. So I've been in language development for say more than 2 years, but I started at a very, very low English level. If I'm making progress even beyond that 2 years, and we can do that, and it's going to be through the WIDA assessment and probably our progress monitoring, then we wouldn't retain that student, because again, language development is fundamental to the literacy development. So those are, I think, are very, very positive caveats or good cause exemptions to this. The other one is that if a student has an IEP or a Section 504 plan already, they already have a plan in place, and they've received 2 or more years of intensive reading intervention. And by the way, intensive reading intervention is a definition in this policy here. And it says that it's an evidence-based program that a student would access for more than 8 weeks, and that it has a student would receive intensive reading support 4 to 5 days a week for half an hour. So these are students who have been identified with reading difficulties, and they're going to be engaged in a program. If they have been in programs for more than 2 years, then but are still demonstrating reading difficulty, they would be able to be moved on to 4th grade, because there's a strong plan in place to grow their proficiency. And of course, the state heard a lot of feedback here in Maryland and basically says there's a 1 retention between grades K through 3. So if a student's already been retained, they're not going to be retained again at this 3rd grade mark. There's a lot going on in there, but I think the state has put a lot of good thinking into how to do this well and in consideration of individual students. Next slide, Mr. Jefferson, please. Now, when it comes to this retention decision, we at City Schools and the state has clear intent around this, is to make sure that families are fully up to speed on this. There are requirements in the law that we begin notifying families of students who have reading difficulty well before this. It's part of the Ready to Read Act. We send out a notification stating that a student's having some reading difficulty and what we plan to do about that. As a student moves through their learning journey, we would want to keep the parents and family members, caretakers in the loop, so that when we get to this kind of more high stakes decision-making point, that they've already been in the loop, so to speak. And so we would invite parents or guardians in to have the conversation about this. Now, one of the things that the state did put in place is if we're having difficulty reaching the parent or the parent's not engaging, we in City Schools are going to make sure that we're following certain number of reach outs and follow-ups. This is not just a, hey, notify the parent one time and then go on. But in the end, if we go through all that good faith process, the default is retention if the parent does not sign off on that. And then one of the things that's required is that students who are retained during for reading proficiency issues will have this student reading intervention plan. I think the term the state's actually going to land on is student reading improvement plan. SRIP is what it's being used as. That's how we're saying it for short. We love an acronym in education. And so that will be something that has to be in place for any student who's identified for retention. All right, next slide, Mr. Jefferson. Switching over to math very quickly, one of the important parts associated with promotion and placement of students on the math side is around this single subject acceleration. And so what the state is intending to do here is that if students are doing very, very well in mathematics, they should have an opportunity to accelerate starting in grade 3 up through grade 7 so that they can access higher level coursework as they move through their learning journey. And so there's this conversation around an automatic math course acceleration. And so we don't know exactly what the state means for sure about automatic. We're starting to receive information. We already have some schools that do some single subject acceleration for students who are showing high proficiency. And so we're actually reaching out to those schools to say, like, how is it that you do this? What are your decision points? What kind of data do you look at? And so that's a real bright spot that this occurs in city schools. But all LEAs in Maryland will be working through this single subject acceleration in mathematics. And I did, Mr. Jutras is not here from our gifted and advanced learners program, but he would want me to point out the difference between single subject acceleration within one topic or one content area versus grade level acceleration, which is a student moves from one grade to the next. We often called it skip a grade when I was a kid. That's a completely different process. That is not what's called out for here in this policy. Next slide. I mentioned that there's going to be an update in some terminology. Oh, there's my reminder from Mr. Jutras, whole grade versus single subject. The other language changes we've made, and we'll make this through any policy that comes to you, is the movement to the term multilingual learner versus English learner. That's a change at the federal and state level. We'll always mirror that. And then we added definitions for things like IEP, the Section 504 plan, who the SST team is, or student support team, and defined a parent or guardian to align with other board policies that we have. The other thing we added were definitions around things like what is a reading intervention, what is a multi-tiered system of support, and in short, that is a way to get all students the good stuff. That's high quality tier 1 instruction that's available to all students in the classroom. And then what are the supports beyond that? What do we do for kids who need a little extra help in reading or mathematics? And then what do we do for students who have significant challenges in reading and mathematics? And that might include an IEP for students identified as special ed, but it may not. It could be a 504 plan. It could just be that student reading improvement plan that's available to them. So we added some language in here to make sure that we were in line with the MSDE's policies. Next slide, updated with the math promotion standards to reflect state requirement of taking a math course each year in high school. That's in here. And now let's talk a little bit, next slide, please, about what we're currently doing that we think prepares us to some extent to be prepared for these changes in policy. One of the first things is we've already made significant investments in programming associated with this. So we have had a strong evidence-based tier 1 reading program in place in both foundational skills and in reading comprehension. So we have our Wit and Wisdom program and our foundations program. We have a very robust assessment system. We have a universal screener and what we call our DIBELS, which assesses foundational skills. And we've seen consistent growth in our students over time in those foundational skills. We do have some tier 2 and tier 3 intervention programs. Those are the programs for kids who need additional help. And we're finding out more and more as we explore this that different schools are having success with different approved programs. And so we're trying to bring some coherence and consistency across the district. And then we have some clear processes for identifying what students need additional help. And we've been actually implementing a significant number of adolescent literacy-based programs and interventions. So those are some real bright spots. Another place is, next slide, Eric. Another place is this conversation around the multi-tiered system of supports. We're going to do some investments in the coming year associated with that, and that includes identifying, purchasing, and training teachers for additional tier 3 programs in both literacy and in mathematics. We're excited that we're going to be bringing in a new 504 plan platform to kind of modernize the creation of these plans, the maintenance of the plans, the monitoring of those plans for our students. We have many students who have 504 plans, and we're going to modernize that system. We do need to do some assessment expansion. And when we do that, we always look at making sure that students are not being over-assessed, that the assessments that we're using have purposes for the teacher, the school leader, and central teams, so that we don't have multiple assessments trying to get us the information that we need. So we have a fairly strong system, but we want to strengthen that because of the significance of things like a retention decision. We want to make sure we have all of our ducks in a row. We're going to update some guidance to the school based on these new policy changes. And we're working to build data transparency and systems in place so that teachers, school leaders have the information at their fingertips to make good decisions about students' learning journeys. And then the last item I want to pull out, that student reading improvement plan that the state is requiring. Originally, my understanding is the first document they came out with was 80 pages of guidance, and they got some quick feedback from locals. Because many local education agencies like city schools already had certain types of plans in place. They might be called different things, but they were generally a plan associated with a student's academic journey. And so we've had student learning plans in place now for a while, and our goal is to just simply integrate the SRIP within that. Now, there are certain requirements and certain questions that have to be answered and documented in these plans. And we're already working on bringing those two pieces together. So that will be relatively seamless for our schools. So that's a stream of work that's happening. So that is the rundown on my component. I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Jefferson.
Thank you, Dr. Cuppet. And so we're going to talk a little bit about IKEB and IKEB-RA, which is the regulation in which our graduation standards. This policy really talks about ensuring students are receiving the right courses for graduation according to COMAR, and that not only the opportunity to graduate, but also having the opportunity to be successful either in college or career preparation. IKEB does define the requirements based on COMAR, so that's credits, enrollment, assessments, and service learning hours. But it gives us the clear communication talking point to all families and all stakeholders regarding graduation requirements and how students are progressing through high school 9 through 12. Some of the adjustments that we made last year in our regulation, IKEB-RA, we removed the reference according to the new math policy that was coming out. We removed that reference of Algebra 2 as a promotional requirement for graduation. It's going to be reflected as the integrated Algebra 1 and integrated Algebra 2 according to the new math state policy. We also removed specific requirements where it said biology, chemistry, and physics, and we made it a broader framework aligned with our state graduation requirements. And that broader framework is life science, physical science, and earth spatial science. So it does open up more opportunities for our students to take more classes that will count as core towards their graduation in the science field. So why are we revising policy IKEB? IKEB is really for the full review of IKEA and all of the updates that are coming down from MSDE and to align to Blueprint. We also limited revisions to administrative regulations, IKEAR and IKEB-RA last school year. Some of those revisions are focused on updating the terminology. So we have to update the terminology according to some of the new MSDE policies. We also want to reflect some of the current practices that are happening in city schools. And that's as of starting the next school year, we will be integrating the new math courses, the integrated Algebra 1, the integrated Algebra 2, and also aligning with all of the MSDE changes. So some of the terminology that we're proposing in this policy change is to remove some of the outdated terms like bridge projects, the bridge plan, the Carnegie unit, and the combined score. when we had HSA, those were combined score of math and ELA. You could also pass using a combined score. If you did not pass your HSA assessments, then you would have what they would call a bridge plan, which were projects that students must complete in order to obtain credit for that state assessment. They no longer have bridge plans. They no longer have a combined score, and they no longer are using Carnegie units. But we did add definitions that has become national, state and national wide when it comes to college and career readiness, and family-friendly language that is consistent with our state guidance. Update definitions of end of course exam, and then also what we call MCAP now, which used to be HSA, now is MCAP. And we're adding the definition in our policy for student service learning hours, because students must complete 75 service learning hours in order to graduate as a graduation requirement. So some other proposed revisions that reflect our current practices. We are clarifying when credit may be given for MSDE approved online courses. So we're moving to some of our original credit online courses, and when we can waiver for a fourth year of high school are graduating within 3 years, and they're waiving that fourth year if they have met all of those requirements. So we do have a process in place, and we also are students may take online original credit at this time. We're also adding language regarding when it's appropriate for students to be able to earn credit by examination. Those students who transfer in, or students who have already mastered the content, they can accelerate by taking the final exam, or taking the exam that is been given out of Kevin's shop, and they can earn credit for that course by examination. And then we're also updating the process for graduation appeals. This language also will reflect the new course sequencing in math. So we're switching to integrated algebra 1 and integrated algebra 2 in next school year. So our school year 27-28. And current initiatives that are connected to board policy, IKEB, the planning of the sequential math courses, which we're already implementing as early as next year, and shifting from that sequence of algebra 1, geometry, algebra 2 to integrated algebra 1, integrated algebra 2. And we are monitoring our on track to graduation. So we're currently focusing on our 9th graders, but we're planning to expand how we support our 9th graders into 10th grade, given the state focus on that initial determination of being college and career ready by the end of 10th grade. We are also moving resources into 10th grade as we are preparing our students for 11th and 12th grade. So our engagement plan, with these significant revisions, we're reaching out to stakeholder groups to share our proposed revisions and offer presentation and feedback sessions. And so we are looking at our Equity Advisory Committee, our charter and operator leads in our schools, some of our parent community advisory boards, our associations of student government in Baltimore City, and all of these partners and major stakeholders. We are planning to share these proposed revisions and offer feedback sessions as we continue on to move this work and to move these policies. So our policy revision timeline, today is the 24th. So this is the initial presentation. Our first reader is April the 7th, and then our second reader is May the 5th. And that concludes our presentation for IKEA and IKEB policy.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I had some questions about how we're going to be informing the community that they can decide not to have their kid retained or choose what's best for them. And I'm actually like happy to hear that this is on the table, because like like from my personal experience in my own education, like third grade and prior was like where I really like fell off, and it was very, very difficult to recover. But I would just like to hear more about like how we're helping families understand like what's on the table and help them make the best decision for them.
Yeah, so I think that's a body of work that we're thinking about planning. The biggest thing is that we can communicate as many channels as we can. So we'll be working with our communications team. MSDE has asked local education agencies to begin having these conversations. The one thing, this was, I want to say I was in so I go to a meeting that is like kind of like my job for all of the LEAs come together. And one of the things we heard across many of the districts was, that's great, we'll do engagement, but we need some clear information from MSD so we're all on the same page. We don't want Calvert County parents hearing one thing and Howard County parents hearing another. And so they are bringing together kind of, for lack of a better term, a toolkit for us, because we don't want to misspeak for the state. And I will tell you, there are some things from an operational perspective that aren't 100% clear. But things around retention and that parents will be involved in the communication, and that here's how you should be finding out your child may have some reading challenges. We have that within our control to do that work. So that's a large body of work that we'll put together. Remember, the retention decision implementation doesn't occur until 27, 28. So we got a little bit of runway, but to your point, I think we need to start communicating this quickly and widely so that we don't want to surprise anybody, right? We don't want to surprise schools. We don't want to surprise our families. And so that's a body of work that we'll be working across multiple departments to get that communication out.
Awesome. And I know you all talked a little bit about like interventions and different tiers for when a student like starts struggling, but in the case if a student isn't promoted, do you all have any information on like what those interventions would look like? Or are those still in development?
Well, actually, we in city schools we have a number of programs that are used. What we're looking to do is try to make it as consistent possible for students and less school by school variance. So, for instance, we use Wilson Foundations in our Tier 1 Everybody Gets program. Well, they also have supplemental materials that can be used in Tier 2 and Tier 3. I just had a conversation with one of our SSLs, one of those folks that support English language arts out in the schools. And they were relating a school that is using those supplementary materials very well with students all the way up into Tier 3 intervention, which is that more intensive one. We're also looking at some additional programs to bring in to have available and do some training with those. Orton Gillingham Plus is one that has a high efficacy rate. It's recommended by the International Dyslexia Association, so on and so forth. So there are programs that we're finding. Number Worlds in Mathematics is one on the mathematics side that's directly tied to our Reveal math materials. It's the same publisher. And so we're trying to develop this kind of comprehensive system, but it is going to require time to train teachers, set up those processes for which you identify students so that you're matching the student with the reading profile for that particular intervention. We don't want to put a student in a fluency intervention if they don't have foundational skills yet, right? We don't want to put a student in a foundational skills if they have that and really they need to work on fluency. And so how do we set those processes up? And I'm not saying that they don't exist. They are being used in schools right now, but how do we build coherence and consistency from school to school? That's one of our goals. The fact that our achievement levels continue to rise in the area of reading, for example, we just looked at some data today from our DIBELS. There's a ton to celebrate here in city schools. We've had some amazing successes. But how do we move to that next level, and how do we make sure we're in alignment with policy and what the state is doing here? So we are identifying programs. We are looking at bright spots in schools. We're currently running several pilots to see what teachers think of materials, how they feel about the professional learning that they're receiving. Remember, city schools is a very large district. So if we can learn from our pilots, that's a great way to have some confidence moving forward with next steps.
Can I ask kind of a pile-on question to that one, Ash?
Sure.
I appreciate how you're framing looking at data transparency. And I think some of that is also looking at how do we not only make it accessible, but teach the skills that is something that all staff have ownership in, and looking at that student level data as a classroom teacher, as a support staff, like whatever that looks
Yeah.
like. And just realistically going into budget cycle, realizing that we are likely looking at a number of tight budget cycles. What are
Yeah.
the investments that you really would buckle in on when you're thinking about equipping really like frontline staff? So like principals,
Sure.
educators, interventionists, paraprofessionals, in terms of really equipping those folks, not only with access to the data that they need in a user accessible way, but also the skills to be able to interpret that. Because
Yeah.
the intervention is only valuable if people know when and how to use it, and that we're accurately identifying kids.
Yeah, I think that question's like 100% on, and we have been having a conversation around this. Now, let me again go to the bright spots. We have a very strong assessment system. I think there's some room for improvement, but we have assessments. Those assessments produce information at the teacher level. School leaders can review that, and we can review it centrally. We were just in a data review this morning. So that's good. But one of the things that we do, if we're going to put a kid in an assessment, the information that comes out has to help the teacher, has to help the school, has to help the system. And so the student only has to take that one assessment, right? So we have assessments that do that. DIBELS does that. iReady does that. We're looking at some other assessment tools that were in pilot phase this year. So that being said, the point that I hear you saying is, how do I make that super easy for the teacher to access? And our folks in OAA have done some great work around some dashboards that we have. Principals, have a dashboard that they use. I was even snooping in on the chief of schools dashboard the other day, because that's set up for those people that are supervising schools to have these great data points. What we really want to focus on is, how does that help teams of teachers at the school level make decisions? So if I'm in kindergarten, I'm a kindergarten teacher, I might be the English learner teacher or two that are assigned to that. I might be a special educator. And now we're looking at performance data around, say, foundational skills. We're looking at DIBELS. We've done some diagnostic probes in there, and we're starting to see a couple of kids who are starting to fall behind their peers in their foundational skills development. And they've already received instruction on it, and they've already received tier 2 supports. Well, that is indicative of a greater reading difficulty. Now, do we have to go into a giant diagnosis here? No, what we need to do is target the support for that student in those skills, and then we progress monitor and we look at the probes and see what's happening with that. That kind of churn within a school is the goal for what we have. And thankfully, I have a visit scheduled to a school, I think it's next week or the week after, for a school that's actually doing that very well. There's an experienced team in place there, and they're looking at that data. Great way for me to go in and learn and figure out, how do we replicate those practices in other places. Schools are looking at this, but how do we move to the next levels to question? And I think the data transparency, I think is important, is also to our families. Like, if we send a data report home and maybe I know what it means, maybe I don't, that's very different than saying, we've identified that your student is having some reading difficulties, and here's what we need to do about it. And that's what I meant earlier about, let's not surprise anybody here. So those are all the fine tuning that needs to occur. Our friends in OAA have been helping. I will say that there is one platform that we're looking at as for a subset of schools right now. That is a data platform that's designed to pull this all together and put it at teachers and leaders' fingertips, because your student information system's only going to have so much capacity. They're designed to do what they do. And as much as OAA has kind of worked to maximize those capabilities, we're bringing in a tool to evaluate in a way to see if that will operationalize this for our teachers and for our leaders in the school setting. So hopefully that gets to where you were seeking information on.
It does. Yes, it does. And I have one follow-up, but I have to go let my children in. Speaking of, actually, someone else. So actually, I'm really glad that you brought up that last point about, as they descend, around this looking at parents, because realistically, those DIBELS and math scores did come home this week, and looking at coming from a fairly high level of awareness, as a teacher in a distant past and a social worker, that you're like realistically not knowing what to do with this, not knowing what my next steps are as a parent of how to partner, it, you know, is definitely a concern as we move to this next phase.
Yeah. And at minimum, if everything's really good and it's okay, that should be clear to you as a parent. Hey, things are really good. Things are okay. But if my student is starting to have challenges, tell me what the plan is. How can I help? That's the kind of collaboration that we need to have between our home setting and our school setting.
Awesome. Thank you.
I know we're running late, but I did have one other final question, if that's okay, Ash.
Yep.
The last one, and I think being able to visit with schools and see what the new kind of within the school's office and looking at coaching and how does that work has been really helpful, and thinking through what that looks like in terms of MTSS interventions. I think kind of the last question is when you're looking at kids that are on kind of at risk of failure or falling through the cracks, like oftentimes that's not something that's happening in silo. Like that's not necessarily just an academic problem. That often coincides with a lot of other kind of social and emotional factors.
Right.
And so I think the district has done a phenomenal job over the last 2 years of really streamlining how we're looking at those MTSS supports. And I've really appreciated watching that. I guess wondering kind of like, what is the effort and how do we also bring kind of some of those surrounding supports around children and families in line, realizing that even talking about communication, like that is going to be the last gap that we can't control for many of these kids.
Yeah. So, and I just want to make sure I'm hearing your question correctly. I've been doing a lot of conversation around what we call the academic part of the MTSS: programming, instruction, assessment. Also important for our students is the MTSS supports around our social, behavioral, emotional components, right? So I actually just had a long conversation with Dr. Dabrowski about, we are also hearing that the schools would like to do some improvement in that area and alignment. And so typically school districts do both of those. It's often ends up being kind of two bodies of work because of the expertise that you need. You know, you need your literacy and math folks to do the academics, but you might need your social workers or people that understand wraparound services or community scores or whatever those components are. And so I think there's high interest in the district for that work. And I will tell you that the academic MTSS work group has been up and running now for about six or 7 weeks, diligently working with people from all across offices, not only in academics. We have friends in schools, we have continuous improvement people in there, we have OAA, our data folks. I would suspect a similar effort will be coming forward associated with those kinds of supports that you're talking about. And again, there's another bright spot for the district. There are a high number of supports that I have been in conversations with school leaders about, that I've heard about from other offices. The question is it comprehensive? Is it coordinated? And is it consistent? That's how I think you move a system to the next level. Great question.
I appreciate that. I think just lifting up that coordination piece, and a lot of the time that for a lot of our schools, you know, like that, those interventions might come from unanticipated places. I remember last week someone was talking about, you're like, whether that's the nutritionist or the health suite, things get lost in where those divisions happen. And I guess part of this just in the experience of walking through schools is my personal and professional experience. My wondering is, what are we missing when it comes to those wraparound supports for children and family, because they are not aligned as tightly as the way we are doing math, instructional support, literacy support with these new MTSS structures as they've been rolled out. A wondering more than a question, maybe. And that's it, Ash, I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for answering all of our questions and for the really thorough presentation.
Hats off, just also, this is a
Thank you.
phenomenal body of work, and thank you for the district. You've done a wonderful job translating their recommendations.
Yep.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too. And up next, we have policy JICF, Safe Schools Act 2010, destructive and illegal group behavior.
All right, good evening, everyone. Good evening, good evening. I believe my colleague is going to cue up the presentation. Is that you, Jonathan? Or is that Cora?
Yes, Dr. Barnes, it's up.
All right, thank you so much. Good evening. My name is Dr. Sabri Barnes, and I am the Director of Student and School Operations Support. And I'm joined by my colleague, Major Chad Ellis of School Police. And we are here today to present the updates to Board Policy JICF, Suspected Criminal Gang-Related Activity. Next slide, please. During this time, we will provide an overview of the current initiatives, proposed revisions, and anticipated challenges in the stakeholder engagement work that needs to be done or has been done. And we'll also take a look at the proposed next steps and timeline. Next slide, please. This particular body of work aligns with board priorities 4 and 7, effectively engaging stakeholders and continuously working towards equity at all levels. Next slide, please. Board Policy JICF adheres to the Safe Schools Act of 2010, destructive or illegal group behavior. Here you can see the legal authorities, state guidance, and key features. And there are several sections of these laws that intersect as it relates to the policy. Next slide, please. What is prohibited by Board Policy GF? Board Policy JICF, prohibits criminal gang activity, which has a specific meaning under Maryland law. It is also important for all staff to understand what type of behavior is prohibited so that students are not unjustly disciplined for behavior that is not criminal gang activity and thus not prohibited under the policy. Next slide, please. In addition to the policy, we have related bodies of work. Some of the current initiatives include training for school leaders, violence intervention initiatives, school police collaboration, as well as all staff compliance training. Next slide, please. There's also an establishment of a community relations unit, school-based educational programming, as well as district-led safety mediation conferences. Next slide, please. We are making these revisions to ensure that we align with best practices and policies to the existing policies and protocols, to update practices and references since Board Policy JICF was last revised in 2011, as well as clarify reporting and investigation processes for schools. Next slide, please. Benchmarking. We took a look at comparable or similar districts as it relates to the demographics and populations. The districts benchmarked included districts across Maryland, DC, Chicago, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Buffalo, Austin, and Charlotte, Mecklenburg. Most of the non-Maryland districts do not have an explicit gang policy, but there is information embedded in their student codes of conduct or policies for school safety. Next slide, please. Proposed changements in alignment with existing practices. During this time, I will review the proposed changes to the policy that align with the gang work that is already happening or that's currently happening, as well as updated language that speaks to the requirement of recording investigations into the city schools incident reporting workflow, as well as updated reporting and investigation language to align with the city schools all staff training materials. Next slide, please. Next, there is the addition of language about city schools collaboration with the Baltimore City Police Department and other law enforcement agencies when there is a report of an ongoing or threatened criminal gang-related violence that appears credible and accurate. Also, the addition of language about services that are provided to students and strategies that schools should use to combat gang-related activity. Next slide, please. There will also be updates to language about supports and services that remove outdated references and reflect the resources that City Schools actually uses. There will be updated references to City Schools offices and employees, and updated language about criminal gang-related records that reflect the use of electronic record keeping and the cross-reference requirement to share select criminal gang-related records with other LEAs as required by COMOS. Next slide, please. Again, we just want to underscore that we want alignment by ensuring that the proposed changes are in alignment with the all staff training, the updated reporting and investigation language to align with the City Schools all staff training materials, as well as providing more guidance for schools on the steps to take when investigating reports of suspected gang activity after benchmarking with other school districts. Next slide, please. There will be proposed changes, some additional proposed changes to forms. Form 1 is the reporting form that documents what was reported to the principal. And we also would like to note that if the activity alleged in the reporting form would be a violation of Board Policy JICF, the investigation will proceed. The principal should always consult with school police as needed. And if the activity alleged in the reporting form is not a crime, the principal can still provide the identified students with supports and services. Next slide, please. Form 2 is the investigation form that is to be completed by the principal, and it documents the investigatory steps, corrective actions, supports, and services provided, and the ultimate determination of whether the student violated Board Policy JICF. Form 3 is the school police validation form, which will help with investigating and validating gang affiliation. Next slide, please. These proposed revisions are classified as Tier 3 due to the significant revisions they have a broad public impact. There will be posts on the City Schools website to invite public feedback, and we also want to reach out to stakeholder groups, which we have listed, to share the proposed revisions and offer presentations or feedback sessions. Next slide, please. And last but not least, here's our timeline. We started this work back in October with our framing conversation with the policy committee. We are here today with an initial presentation of the revisions. First reader will be on April the 8th, followed by the second reader on May the 19th.
Awesome, thank you. And I have 2 questions. How are we making sure that we're intervening proactively? And how are we making sure it's clear that we're focused on gang activity, but not over policing kids or, like disrupting social groups, like misinterpreting things as gangs?
All right, I apologize. Am I back on?
Yep, I can hear you.
All right, I did not want to have a dramatic exit like that. My laptop actually died at the very last slide, so my apologies. But we would like to open the floor for any questions.
Got it. Okay, perfect. So I have 2 questions. How are you making sure we're addressing this proactively? And then also, how are we making sure that we're not over policing some of our students or misidentifying like social groups as gang activity?
Okay, so I'm going to start with the second question in regards to the over policing. The school police department is under the chief of schools umbrella. And with that, it really provides an opportunity for us to always work cross collaboratively, especially when it comes down to operationalizing what is in black and white and how it plays out for students and staff. So we're always working very closely. And within the school's office, we have the Office of Student Conduct and Attendance. We're also working cross collaboratively with legal. So I think that we just, by nature of the way how our org is set up, we have people who are boots on the ground, who really, are removed from the satellite view of things and can really articulate how things are operationalized in schools.
Got it.
And your first, can you repeat your first question?
How are we being proactive about this?
I feel like this work has been going on for quite some time. Unpopular opinion, well, it's not an opinion, it's really, and I believe we have someone on legal on the line. Caitlin, if you're there, students, young people being in gangs is something that we do not want to see. But being in a gang is not illegal. We focus on the aspects that would interrupt the daily operations of a school or create unsafe conditions for students and staff. And that's when you really get into that criminal behavior. So this language or mention of gang activity has always been included in the code of conduct. I think now that we are really paying extra close attention. I mean, social media has exacerbated a lot. Everything has just become much more bigger over the past 5 to 7 years. So now, again, working collectively with school police, revising our policy, which has not been revised since 2010, shows that we have lessons learned, and we're just trying to get better.
Can I also add, hello everyone, Stacy Toze, Chief of Schools. We've had several trainings for our school leaders that have been co-facilitated with our school police and Baltimore City Police, just on gang awareness, identify the signs, and to Dr. Barnes' point, being in a gang is not illegal, but certain behaviors are. So those are some of the things that we have done to proactively support school leaders. And then we also have our school police student advisory board, where we're working with them to, just revise some of the trainings that we do have.
To the point around training, I just completed my training module on CickUp and looking at how you've really diversified that message based on access, and that was a helpful framing. And looking through that, I was like, yes, that is a useful way to encourage staff to think critically about what and how and why they're reporting things.
Were there any other questions?
None from me.
Oh.
I'll ask my other colleagues if they have any questions, or colleague.
None from me. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. Let me see. So we had 2 compliance reports. Compliance report JBA, non-discrimination for students, and JBB, sex-based discrimination, and JICK, bullying, harassment, intimidation of students. Did anyone have any questions about that one? Okay, hearing none. Move my screen. And our other compliance report is, sorry, my computer's being a little slow. JFC, intra-district student transfer. Any questions?
Sorry, actually, going back quickly to the report on bullying, I think just a broad question of looking at how you're that there's been a remarkable like there's been a decrease in the number of bullying cases over 2 years ago, which is is good. But I think just also looking at to the theme of data today, of looking at how are we tracking that, like looking at kind of what's happening as those reports are coming into the district, what's the workflow in terms of how those reports are closed out, kind of what are some of the themes that we're taking away from this work, and then looking also at realistically, these are huge numbers. So looking at what, while we're moving in the right direction, what are kind of the investments that we should be looking to be making going into the next budget year. And I don't know if someone's from the wholeness office the Office of the Whole Child is there, or we can follow up later.
Hi, it's Josh Sivan, Chief Legal Officer, and I think Dr. Place-Tosay is still with me from the school's office, so to join in lieu of anybody on the wholeness office here. But I think that there was like a slight downward trend, but I'd look overall that, to your point, Commissioner Ames Messenger, that there's still a large number of reports. And I think that we've done a lot of work over the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years to really enhance parents, staff's awareness of reporting obligations. I think we need to be continued to be vigilant. So that's an important piece. I also think that given the conflicts that happen in schools, constantly reminding about what is interpersonal conflict and what is bullying. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't and that we do consequence interpersonal conflict, but making sure to have that balance. Also, this report aligns, and it's fair practice in my office, with bullying based on protected classes. So that needs to be continued to be vigilant. We've done a lot of work, both wholeness, both in our advisory and the like, just to make sure that we're vigilant there. And we're looking at other options, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Place-Tosay around bolstering advisory, aligning it with the developments in health curriculum, just to make sure that we're constantly engaging around students to make sure that we're both promoting respectful culture, despite what's happening out in the broader world. We really want to teach respectful and civil ways in which students are engaging with their peers to resolve conflict. Dr. Place-Tosay, anything to add?
Yeah, well, you was going to steal what I was going to say, but I also invited Katia Stokes, who's in charge of our bullying work, to answer some questions. So Commissioner Ames Messenger, can you ask that just one more time so Katia could answer that for you?
Yeah, of course. Hello, Ms. Stokes. Just, I think looking frankly, like that we are moving in the right trend. There are a lot of good interventions happening. I think 2 questions looking at kind of what's happening in terms of data tracking for these, realizing that these are often incidents that are happening at the school, and how are we responding as a district, and what's kind of the flow of how that's being managed from just like a data and logistical fashion. And then the second part of that question is just looking at kind of what are the investments that the board should be looking for going into the next budget year, dealing with continued support.
Yes, all great questions. Hopefully I won't say anything that is already been said. I won't repeat, but sounds like the first question was about the data and logistics and the flow. So yes, the expectation is that when we receive bullying reports, there are always district members who are able to review and read just to see if there's anything we might need to flag. There are particular cases that we want to make sure that we are automatically involving our legal team. And so we are always constantly reading those. Now, the specific investigation occurs at the school level, but our office, along with our partners in fair practices, are always there and available to support our leadership with their reporting. Oftentimes, they will ask us for support on how to investigate, but then also they ask us questions about what interventions can they possibly give students, or what's the best course. There are often times where we are often supporting leadership as well with some of those conversations with parents, because as you can imagine, sometimes it's a very difficult conversation for parents to have. And so there are a lot of times that we are really supporting our leadership with how to best frame those questions and conversations. I will say that one of the things that we really wanted to make sure that we're starting to do, and our Chief Jose really pushes on this a lot, is while we do a lot of work on like looking at the report, the data, the compliance piece, and that's important because we want to be responsive, but we also want to focus a lot on the preventative work. And so while we know we have like morning meeting advisory and we have lessons that are specifically embedded in there, yes, around bullying, yes, specifically around how to report, yes, around what is it to be a bystander, what does that mean? But we also know that we want to make sure we're moving towards what MSD is pushing us towards too as well, some of those interventions that speak towards specific students, those small groups sessions. So that's something that we really want to be more intentional about and having some of that preventative programming. And the other thing is just making sure that everyone's clear on what bullying is, right? Sometimes I guess if we were to take a pause here and ask everyone, what do you think bullying is? We might all have different definitions. As you can imagine, if we all have different ways that we're thinking about it or explaining it, that can cause a lot of confusion. And so moving from the place of making sure people know how to report, because that was one particular challenge. And that was really one thing our young people called us out on. Make sure we know how to report it. So I think we've done a lot of great work around that, but now moving to, but let's make sure we're all having the same conversation and talking about the same thing about what is bullying. And what was part two? The second question, I feel like I think I
Some
might
of
have
the
asked it from both.
investments.
Yes.
Just what we're looking for investments in the new budget year.
Yes. So for the upcoming school year, we will be investing in a new system. Wanting to make sure that that new system, yes, that's very important, but we want to make sure that the new system is actually custom built for us to be able to look at the different interventions that schools are implementing. And that we can do that in a dashboard level. Right now, I will say that the system is quite old. It's been in place for a while, but with the new advancement in technology, we really want to be able to look at the data in a more comprehensive way to say, where are we really seeing bullying take place? And then based upon that, being able to support school teams with having structured conversations around that data. So moving away from it just being a report to now, how does all this information that we're receiving in the report help us to be more intentional about the supports that we are actually structuring in schools? But also making sure that our school leadership teams, our culture and climate teams are having those data-driven conversations to say, now, where might we also need to invest in additional programming? Yep. Or if you think about our morning meeting advisory, we have a select section of activities that they can choose from. So then ILT teams can be more intentional, or culture and climate teams can be more intentional about going in and looking specifically at those types of content.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I think just as a general note, like I appreciate the thoughtfulness of like, how do we build out kind of a strategic intervention the same way we would do that we were just talking about with math and reading and English, and how do we do that in a similar way in terms of these interventions? Thanks. That's really helpful.
Of course.
And I don't have any other questions on that one.
Okay, thank you. And then we have, did you have any questions on JFC intra-district student transfer?
No, so many, but not at this time. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be doing the same, writing up my questions once I process. Do we have any public comment today?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. There is no public comment for this afternoon.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So that is the end of our agenda. Our next meeting is going to be on March 24th, 2026. And we will be looking at, sorry, I don't have it in front of me.